Hey guys, tonight we drift into a courtroom so sleepy, so fogged with uncertainty, that even the ghosts couldn't be bothered to show up on time. You trudge through the damp cobbled streets of 17th century England, boots slick with mist, the air heavy with chimney soot, and the sound of creaky signboards swinging in the wind. A bell tolls in the distance, not a dramatic one, just a soft, resigned ding that suggests whatever's about to happen probably isn't urgent. You make your way toward a low stone building slouched near the edge of a moor, its thatched roof puffing up steam like it's exhaling. Inside, the wooden benches groan with age and boredom. The judge, powdered and perpetually squinting, is already nodding into his wig. The court clerk adjusts his quill, ready to record what may be the sleepiest, strangest legal argument in British history: whether a ghost can be summoned as a witness. You probably won't survive this, not from fright, of course, but because the logic about to unfold is so gently ridiculous, so endlessly meandering, that you may find yourself curling up like a cat before we even reach the closing arguments. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to post your location and local time in the comments. It's always a joy to see where you're tuning in from, whether you're in Kent or Kentucky, at 8 p.m. or 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the courtroom and notice right away that there's no one seated in the witness chair. Not because the witness is late, mind you, but because the witness is allegedly dead. And not recently dead either. We're talking for decades, one crumbling tombstone, and 3 generations of whispered pub tales dead. The plaintiff, a narrow-shouldered man named Thomas Hatchley, stands to speak. His voice trembles slightly, though not from fear, more like irritation mixed with exhaustion. He claims that a ghost has been harassing his tenants, causing them to abandon his farmland and, worse still, his rent payments. His crops are failing, his sleep is disrupted, his hayloft creaks ominously at odd hours. The culprit, he insists, is none other than the spirit of Jonathan Bellwether, the land's previous owner who died in 1631, and apparently still holds a grudge. Historians still argue whether Hatchley truly believed in the haunting, or whether this was a desperate strategy to default on a series of unpaid loans. Some suggest he may have fabricated the ghost entirely. Others insist the ghost made a perfectly reasonable case, off the record, at the edge of the marsh one moonless night. You glance round the courtroom. The judge has set down his teacup and is staring into the middle distance with an expression that suggests he, too, has seen some things, or perhaps just misplaced his glasses again. The prosecutor, a thick-set man with an admirable collection of forehead wrinkles, mutters something about jurisprudence being for the living. But the defense, oh, they're prepared. Representing the ghost, yes. You heard that right, is a young barrister with the tragic confidence of someone who thinks citing Aristotle will actually help. He flips open a thick leather-bound tome and begins to explain that while ghosts may lack earthly form, they may still linger in contractual principle. A ripple of polite coughing echoes from the gallery. No one laughs. This is England, after all. At one point, the court clerk leans over and whispers to the bailiff, "Do we need to swear in the ghost, or?" The bailiff shrugs and says he's already placed a Bible on the witness chair, just in case. A few villagers have gathered to watch the proceedings. One woman is knitting what might be a scarf or possibly a noose, hard to say at this point. A young lad in the back snickers when the prosecutor asks whether the ghost intends to present any physical evidence. "Only if it's ectoplasmic," the defense quips. No one laughs, but the judge smirks faintly, which is essentially a standing ovation by courtroom standards. And you, You're slumped against the wooden bench, eyelids heavy, lulled by the cadence of legal jargon and the soft scratch of quills. It's the kind of logic that spirals inward like steam on a teacup. At one point, someone suggests that perhaps the spirit should be tried in absentia. Someone else objects on the grounds that the ghost is present in essence, though not in body. The argument loops 3 more times before the judge waves a hand and calls for tea. You stretch your legs as the session pauses, the sleepy courtroom sighing as one. Outside, a raven lands on the windowsill and peers in, as if mildly curious about spectral precedent. Inside, the discussion meanders toward whether ghosts are subject to tithing law, and somewhere in the rafters, something creaks not dramatically, just enough to be inconvenient. You smile, settling deeper into the bench, because you know now that this sleepy court will debate the legality of ghosts not for hours, but for days. And by the time they reach a verdict, if they ever do, you'll be far too drowsy to remember what they decided. The trial resumes after tea, though frankly, most of the court never fully left their seats. The judge returns with a biscuit crumb on his robe, which he either doesn't notice or chooses to treat as a ceremonial embellishment. You're not sure. Either way, he settles in, readjusts his powdered wig with a sigh that sounds centuries old, and nods for proceedings to continue. You blink slowly as the farmer, Hatchley, takes the stand again, his boots still muddy from the walk across what he insists is haunted ground. He describes in a weary monotone how his oxen refuse to plow the field, how his barn doors slam in the dead of night, and most dramatically how one tenant swore he saw a floating gentleman in a nightcap humming AM with no mouth to sing it. The court dutifully writes this down. Hatchley, clearly a man who has milked both cows and courtrooms, adds with a self-pitying sniffle that his wife now sleeps with a candle and that the sheep have developed anxious tendencies. The jury, already halfway to dreamland, nods slowly, their eyes like heavy shutters in a winter breeze. You let the sleepy absurdity roll over you, the courtroom's creaks and coughs becoming a kind of lullaby. Then it happens. The defense, yes, the one representing the ghost, announces they will be presenting testimony in behalf of the spirit. A gasp flutters through the gallery, followed by a flurry of bonnet adjustments and one audible "oh, goodness" from an elderly woman clutching her prayer beads like a legal brief. In walks the local medium, Madame Featherby, dressed in flowing black lace with earrings that tinkle like glass teacups. Her entrance is less a walk and more a slow theatrical glide, like someone used to making soup with both hands in the air. She places herself in the witness chair with an air of grave sincerity. Historians still argue whether Madame Featherby truly believed in her craft or whether she simply knew a good business opportunity when she saw one. Some call her a gifted trance channeler. Others suggest she once held seances mainly for bored merchants' wives and gentlemen with indigestion. The clerk, trying desperately to appear professional, asks Madame Featherby to state her name and occupation. She gives both with a flourish, then promptly closes her eyes and begins to hum. Low, discordant, slightly nasal. The judge reaches for his teacup again but finds it empty. He frowns deeply, which, in judicial terms, is akin to an emotional outburst. After a few sighs and a minor chair adjustment, Madame Featherby announces that she has connected with the spirit in question. Jonathan Bellwether is present, she says. He wishes to speak. You tilt your head, half curious, half asleep, as she begins to channel the spirit's message, voice trembling with the cadence of a man clearly discontent with the afterlife. According to Madame Featherby, Jonathan regrets selling the land in life, wishes it had gone to his cousin, and now feels morally bound to spook its current occupants until further notice. The jury blinks. The prosecutor, arms crossed, asks the obvious, is the ghost aware he's disrupting lawful agricultural commerce? Madame Featherby replies, In a notably deeper voice, the dead care not for the yield of turnips. There's a long pause. Someone sneezes. The bailiff clears his throat and promptly regrets it. The judge, scribbling something that may or may not be a grocery list, asks if the ghost intends to vacate the property willingly. Only, replies Madame Fetherby turned bellwether, if the fence line is restored to its 1619 boundary and the rooster is removed. It is unclear whether the rooster is alive or also a ghost. And you're marveling at how serious everyone looks. As if it's entirely reasonable to debate legal boundaries with a man who's been dead since before the invention of the teabag. You hear muttering behind you. Apparently, someone wants to enter the ghost's confession into the court record. A junior clerk suggests they transcribe it in grey ink to distinguish spectral evidence from the merely hearsay variety. The judge allows it. A fringe tidbit. One of the older jurors claims she once met Bellwether in a dream. The court gently reminds her that dreams do not carry legal weight unless corroborated by at least two conscious witnesses. The defense rests their case for the day, promising further revelations from the other side in the morning. The courtroom begins to thin. Madame Fetherby is escorted out, still muttering faintly in a voice 3 tones lower than her own. As you step outside, the mist clings like a wool blanket and the moon is smudged behind a chimney plume. You can't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, the ghost has already won not the trial, but the night. Because everyone's going home a little less certain of what the law can reach. And everyone, including you, is walking slower, looking sideways at shadows, wondering if they, too, will one day require legal representation from beyond the grave. Morning creeps into the village with the subtlety of a butler bringing bad news. The mist hangs lower today, pooling in the dips of the road like sleepy tea left too long in the cup. You pull your cloak tighter as you step back into the courtroom, which smells faintly of soot, candle wax, and the unspoken regret of yesterday's legal choices. The court is abuzz or as close to buzzing as a courtroom filled with people over the age of 60 and under the speed of molasses can get. Today, the talk is not about whether ghosts exist. That, curiously, seems to have been settled with a shrug and a biscuit. No, today's focus is on something far stranger. Whether a ghost's confession, as transcribed through a professional medium in a lace shawl, can be legally admitted into evidence. You take your usual spot on the hard bench, feeling the creak of the wood beneath you like the bones of an old ox. Madame Fetherby is back, of course, sipping something green from a brass flask and looking extremely pleased with herself. The clerk, meanwhile, is staring at his ink-stained copy of Jonathan Bellwether's statement, wondering aloud if he should have used invisible ink, just for theme consistency. The judge calls the room to order with an extra sleepy thump of his gavel. It barely echoes. Someone coughs in reply. The wind outside does the rest. The prosecution, clearly the only person still pretending this is a serious affair, rises with a sigh and argues that spectral confession, while colorful, should not meet the court's threshold for valid testimony. It cannot be cross-examined, he insists, and it was delivered by a woman who claims she once channeled a squirrel with unfinished texts. The defense objects. Mildly, they seem to know they're losing this part of the argument, but their tone suggests they also know they've already won in other ways, mainly by convincing an entire courtroom to refer to a ghost as the previous occupant. Historians still argue whether this moment marked a turning point in evidentiary standards or simply a delightful detour into nonsense. Some say the court's willingness to entertain the ghost's confession shows an early form of legal empathy. Others suspect the judge just liked Madame Fetherby's cookies. You let the sleepy logic wash over you as the prosecution calls its next witness, a tenant farmer named Giles, who looks like he's never been properly dry. He takes the stand reluctantly, clutching his cap like a rosary. and confirms that yes, strange things do happen at Hatchley's Land. According to Giles, the well sings, not loudly, just a little warble, like someone whizzing through a crack in an old mug. The jury blinks as one. The judge jots something down that may have been musical plumbing. Giles also mentions finding his plow turned backward and a haystack mysteriously shaped like a bishop's hat. Could have been the wind. He admits, could have been Jonathan. Hard to tell with either. Then comes the document. The confession. It's read aloud in court. The clerk's voice slow, clear, and drifting like molasses uphill. Bellwether, through Madame Fetherby, claims to have left an unresolved contract for the land one never properly sealed, and thus never spiritually binding. He claims remorse for terrifying the animals, though insists the chicken started it. You try not to laugh. It would be rude. And besides, the judge is taking notes again. The document closes with a peculiar request, that the ghost be allowed to rest only once a stone marker is erected with the words asterisk here stood Bellwether, who couldn't stand liars. Asterisk the court murmurs. The defense offers to pay for the stone, should the court rule in their favor. The prosecution mutters something about setting dangerous precedents and questions whether ghosts will now demand pensions. A fringe tidbit worth noting. The jury sends a written question to the judge asking whether they'll need to deliberate in the same room as the ghost. The judge replies with a shrug and a weary. He's already here. Isn't he? You can't tell whether he's joking. No one can. By midday, the sun struggles through the windows in streaks, lighting up the floating dust in the air like sleepy golden thread. You feel yourself nodding slightly, the rhythm of the court soothing you deeper into a warm, drowsy stillness. Because this court, somehow, has fully embraced its own nonsense. The arguments aren't about winning anymore. They're about understanding, at least in a gentle, slightly confused way, what it means to exist in the margins of life and law. And as the bell above the courthouse tolls for luncheon, everyone files up not with urgency, but with a kind of shared yawn. The ghost's words now hang in the air like the mist outside, uncertain, unprovable, and somehow more believable for both. You return from the midday break with a stomach full of lukewarm stew and bread so dense it could legally qualify as a blunt object. The court resumes in the same manner it paused, with mild confusion, drowsy formality, and an ever-thickening fog of absurdity. This afternoon's question is a doozy. Can ghosts be considered legal occupants of land? The courtroom's energy level is somewhere between overheated greenhouse and parsnip. The judge enters with a slightly longer robe than this morning, no one knows why. Perhaps he meant to appear more imposing, or perhaps he just grabbed the wrong hanger. Regardless, he slides into his seat with a noise like a deflating armchair and gestures vaguely for the court to proceed. The defense takes the floor, launching into a slow-paced argument about posthumous residency rights. He cites medieval scrolls, ecclesiastical court records, and one particularly unhinged legal treatise from 1478 that referred to ghosts as lingering subjects of the crown. It takes 5 minutes to realize that was actually satire, but the court lets him continue anyway. Historians still argue whether this particular strand of legal reasoning was an early form of common law metaphysics, or simply the side effect of too many courtroom lunches involving meat and pickled eggs. You lean back, feeling the wood of your bench press a sleepy groove into your spine, and listen as terms like disembodied tenancy and corporeal nuisance float softly through the room like the prosecution counters that the land belongs to the living and that no title deed in England includes room for supernatural interlopers. The jury appears torn not morally, just in terms of how awake they can manage to stay through the closing argument. At one point, the defense calls for the curious exhibit, the original parchment deed from the Bellwether estate. It's weathered, smudged, and smells faintly of potatoes. On it, in shaky ink, is an annotation no one had noticed before. May he never part from this soil. A gasp would be too energetic for this courtroom. Instead, someone inhales slowly and then stops. The judge lifts an eyebrow so slowly you're surprised it doesn't creak. Poetic language, he mutters, not legally binding, but the clerk notes it anyway, scribbling in a large, slightly judgmental hand. Asterisk, deed contains spectral ambiguity. Asterisk. Then comes the wetness no one expected. A traveling friar from the northern shires, who claims to have blessed haunted homes and once exercised a wardrobe with bad manners. He stands at the front of the room, robes dusted with road salt, and declares that a ghost can only claim space if no living soul challenges them to spiritual arbitration. You watch as the entire courtroom pauses, considering whether that's an actual rule or something invented mid-sentence. No one challenges it, so it floats into the court record unopposed. A fringe detail emerges in cross-examination. The friar mentions a Welsh village where hauntings are registered with the local notary. The judge makes a note to look into this, but only if we run out of things to argue or light. Throughout the afternoon, the atmosphere grows dreamier, the courtroom increasingly resembling a library at nap time. Jurors nod politely. Someone in the gallery knits what might be a tea cozy shaped like a tombstone. You glance toward Hatchley, the plaintiff, who's now nervously fidgeting with his cap. It's become clear that if the ghost is ruled a lawful occupant, Hatchley may have to pay back rent to a spirit. The defense graciously offers to suggest the payment be made in candlelight vigils or annual flower offerings. The prosecution objects to that on the grounds that you can't invoice incense. The judge gently waves the objection aside, eyes closed, as though deciding by instinct or perhaps dreams. You can't help but smile into your collar as the clerk mutters aloud. So we've now considered that the ghost has motive, property interest, testimonial presence, and possibly poetic endorsement. Another juror writes a question on a scrap of paper. If we rule in the ghost's favor, will we be expected to continue correspondence? No one answers. The wind does, though a soft rattle at the window like someone brushing past with unfinished business. You sit back and watch as the courtroom lets its own sleepy story unfold, one soft breath at a time. There are no gavel slams, no fiery objections, no shocking twists, just the quiet turning of an entire legal system toward the fog and asking, now what? Because in this courtroom, justice isn't swift, it's slow, it's strange, and tonight, it belongs just as much to the dead as the living. The next morning arrives as all sleepy English mornings do, grey, wet, and vaguely apologetic. You shuffle back into the courtroom beneath a drizzling sky that feels less like weather and more like atmosphere. The village dogs don't even bark anymore when you pass. They, too, are waiting for the verdict, though mostly because the bailiff feeds them leftover biscuits during breaks. Today's session opens with unexpected fervor. The arrival of the village parson, Reverend Thistlethwaite, who has requested to testify regarding Asterisk the haunted. Well, Asterisk, yes, there is now a haunted well. You take your seat as the parson hobbles forward, robes damp at the hem, holding the leather-bound Bible so large it could crush a modest goat. He clears his throat with the solemnity of a man about to quote scripture, though what he says instead is, I once heard a voice from the bottom of the well call me a coward. And so it begins. The court listens in what can only be described as active lethargy. The judge leans forward, his chin resting comfortably in one hand. The clerk, feathered quill at the ready, writes slowly and deliberately as though each letter carries the weight of existential confusion. The parson recounts that he was called to Hatchley's land not just as clergy, but as spiritual consultant. The well, he says, has long been associated with odd phenomena, tools disappearing, the occasional scream at midnight, and most damning a chicken that refused to lay eggs near it. The chicken, you note, is not in court. but everyone glances at the door just in case. Historians still argue whether the well's haunting was metaphorical or merely acoustic mischief from ground echoes and nearby badgers. Others insist this case marked the first official attempt in English history to treat a well as a potential witness. The parson continues. He once lowered a lantern down the well, only to have it flicker and extinguish mid-descent. The flame, he says, was snuffed by something unseen, perhaps by the breath of the dearly departed. The prosecution raises a slow, unimpressed hand and asks, might it have been damp air? The parson agrees, but also insists the flame whimpered, which no one is quite sure how to argue against. You settle further into your seat, letting the murmurs swirl round you like wood smoke. There is something hypnotic about the courtroom's pace, each sentence more delicate than the last. The absurdity so politely stated that it begins to feel reasonable. The defense presses the parson gently. Did he, in fact, see anything? No, the parson replies. But I felt something, and I'd like that entered into record. It is, alongside the previous entry from Madame Featherby, and the official jury notation that reads, Will equals emotionally aggressive. Next. The bailiff is called to provide his experience during a nighttime inspection at the property. He trudges to the stand like a man summoned from hibernation. His story is brief but vivid. The door to the hayloft opened on its own. A single candle went out despite no breeze. And most curiously, he felt a hand pat his shoulder. Though no one was there, he admits it may have been a branch, or wishful thinking, or indigestion, but the courtroom is listening now. Not with belief necessarily, but with that special kind of attention reserved for a bedtime ghost stories told too close to the hearth. The fire doesn't crackle here, but the candles flicker just so, and outside the wind begins to moan, not howl. Just moan, like someone politely clearing their throat from beyond. The judge sighs, rubs his eyes, and suggests they pause for a tea. Again, you're starting to think the hauntings may be mostly timed to this man's caffeine needs. A fringe moment. One of the jurors quietly slips a small note to the clerk, asking if the court might consider installing a ghost box for anonymous spiritual feedback. The note is filed but not read aloud. Returning from the break, the parson offers a closing thought. Whether spirit or shadow, he says, we are called to consider all presences in the parish. It's a nice thought, poetic, possibly theological, entirely useless from a legal standpoint. But still, you smile. Because in this courtroom, the line between evidence and parable has thinned to the width of a cobweb. And that cobweb, just maybe, trembled last night under the weight of something unseen. You file out with the rest, into a street that seems a little quieter, a little more watched. The haunted well waits beyond the hill, silent now. Its stones slick with rain and the memory of something that might or might not have whispered from the deep. You return to the courtroom under skies that can only be described as extremely British, grey, featureless, and leaking gently onto your shoulders. The doors creak open not with fanfare, but with the slow sigh of an old house that knows its job and isn't particularly thrilled about it. Today's session opens with a quiet crisis. The court artist, tasked with documenting the proceedings for a posterity, has submitted a blank page. At first, the judge assumes it's a joke. Then he assumes it's an error. Finally, after some squinting and tea-fueled muttering, he accepts the explanation. The page depicts the ghost. A few jurors chuckle. The defense claps once softly. The artist, a quiet man with a remarkable talent for drawing sheep that look ashamed, merely shrugs and says, I thought it was tasteful. And just like that, the court enters its next sleepy puzzle. How does one render the invisible? You drift into your seat as the clerk reads aloud a witness statement from the blacksmith, who claims he once saw Bellwether's ghost in the reflection of a soot-streaked horseshoe. Only for a moment, he says, but long enough to feel judged. This is added to the growing collection of ghost encounters, which now includes 2 cold breezes, a missing carrot, and a loaf of bread that floated gently off a table during Vespers. The prosecution objects on grounds of culinary irrelevance, but the judge lets it pass. He seems to be entering a philosophical phase. Historians still argue whether this moment marked a turning point in courtroom illustration or merely a low point in artistic motivation. Some suspect the blank drawing was a quiet protest. Others believe the artist was trying to express the ghost's presence as absence, a sort of negative space testimony. Whatever the intention, it sticks. The jury asks for copies. The defense hangs one behind their table like a portrait of their client. It begins to seem normal. Then comes the carpenter, a man with little patience for nonsense and even less tolerance for metaphysics. He's here to testify that the door hinges at Hatchley's barn move without physical interference. He's examined them, greased them, replaced them. The door still swings open at exactly 11:03 p.m. every Tuesday. Could be wind, he admits, but it's not. You blink slowly. The jury does too. The judge jots something down, then flips back 3 pages and adds a note next to emotionally aggressive well. You imagine it now. A court record bloated with marginalia, ghost references, and doodles of empty chairs. The courtroom murmurs as the carpenter explains his experiment. He placed sand under the hinges and marked the trail with crushed eggshells. The next morning, the trail was smudged in a way no living foot could smudge. The prosecution, visibly aging by the hour, asks whether the carpenter may have simply tracked the smudge himself. "I sleep barefoot," the man replies. This had shoes. No one breathes for a full 10 seconds. You start to wonder whether this is all a mass sleepwalk. Not fraud, not fantasy, just a collective moment of public drowsiness so powerful it generates consensus reality, the kind only a cold courtroom and a low bar for evidence could sustain. Then, just when you think the day can drift further into cozy absurdity, Madame Featherby rises uninvited and insists she has received new information from Bellwether. The judge looks at her over his glasses, says nothing, and waves his hand like he's brushing crumbs off a windowsill. She declares that Bellwether appreciates the drawing and would like a version for his spiritual desk. This is entered into the record. No one laughs. This is no longer a trial. It is performance art staged by a village that forgot how to end a sentence. A fringe moment. The artist begins sketching the parson, but the man insists he include a faint outline of the Holy Spirit over my shoulder. The artist complies. It looks like a ghostly teapot. The parson is delighted. As the session closes, the judge rubs his temples and declares they'll resume tomorrow with a discussion of material presence versus testimonial consistency, which is a fancy way of saying, can we legally acknowledge someone who cannot take the stand, yet insists on standing round? You file out with the others. The gallery is quieter now, not solemn, just sleepy. Everyone seems a little more open to the idea that perhaps the world is wider than the law, and perhaps justice, like a good blanket, must occasionally cover things it cannot fully explain. And as you step back into the mist, you feel watched not in a sinister way, just in the way a house feels watched after you leave it. You look once over your shoulder. Just fog, just bricks, just a quiet sketch of nothing pinned to a courtroom wall. You arrive at the courthouse just as the bells chime the hour, though no one can agree which hour it actually is. The village clock is 3 minutes first. The courtroom's is 10 minutes behind, and someone swears they saw the sundial shadow move backwards. It's that kind of day. The crowd inside is thinner now, not out of disinterest, mind you, just fatigue. Legal ghost logic takes its toll. You shuffle back to your creaky bench, which now has a familiar warmth, like a well-used kettle. Today's session begins with an experiment. Yes, an experiment in court. Apparently, The defense has decided that if they can't prove the ghost exists in a traditional sense, they'll demonstrate his presence through a series of, let's say, interpretive methods. First up, the bell test. A small silver bell, suspended on a thread above a stone bowl of water, has been placed on a wooden table in full view of the jury. The medium, Madam Featherby, insists the ghost will jingle it when he feels acknowledged. So the court waits. 5 minutes, 10. You begin to suspect the ghost has a flair for dramatic timing, or perhaps is as deeply bored as everyone else. Then the bell twitches. It doesn't ring. It twitches. A tiny shiver. The defense gasps. The gallery murmurs. The prosecutor, to his credit, does not faint, but does look suspiciously like he swallowed a button. Historians still argue whether the bell moved due to a draft, a tremor, or the sheer tension of too many people staring at one object in absolute silence. Others believe bellwether was just fashionably late. Next comes the spoon test. A series of wooden spoons are placed along the bench at the front of the court, each balanced delicately on its edge. One falls. Madam Featherby claims it was Jonathan's yes. The judge raises one eyebrow so high it briefly becomes part of his wig. The bailiff, who's been leaning against the wall with the air of a man trying not to fall asleep standing up, comments under his breath, "Next they'll be dusting with breadsticks." He's not far off. Then there's the temperature demonstration. The blacksmith is called in again, not to speak, but to hold a metal rod in the presence of the ghost. A second rod is left nearby and touched. After a few moments, the blacksmith reports his rod feels colder than the other. The clerk dutifully records, rod, subjective chill, present. You tilt your head. At this point, you've heard enough legal jargon to understand this is less about winning and more about, well, keeping the room from becoming just a room again. There's a rhythm to it now. A theater. Everyone's in on it, even the skeptics. Then, a new witness takes the stand. Not a man of science, but the village baker. He testifies, quite seriously, that ever since the dispute began, his sourdough starter refuses to rise in the mornings. Something's off, he mutters, like the yeast knows. The prosecution objects. The judge considers, then says, "Noted, but inadmissible." Unless the bread speaks, a fringe moment comes when the judge, halfway through sipping his tea, absent-mindedly reaches for a biscuit that isn't there, only for the plate to shift toward him, just slightly. He stares at it for a long moment, says nothing, keeps sipping. No one else mentions it, but everyone saw. You lean back, letting the soft candlelight flicker over your eyelids. The wind outside sighs through the shutters. Somewhere in the rafters, something shifts a squirrel, perhaps, or not. And yet, no one moves to dismiss any of this, because slowly, without anyone saying it aloud, the court has begun to accept that what cannot be named might still be felt. That evidence, in this sleepy court, includes goosebumps and long pauses and spoons that tremble for no one. They conclude the day's session with a reading bellwether's supposed final statement, transcribed through the medium. It's short, oddly poetic. I stay where I stood, not for vengeance, but for being forgotten. Let the record show I lived, and lingered, and listened. The room is very quiet. The judge closes his book. That will be enough for today. And with that, the gallery rises, hats in hands, feet shuffling toward the fog. You drift with them, warm with the strange comfort of a court that tries gently, patiently to understand the unprovable. Because maybe justice isn't always about facts. Maybe, sometimes, it's about listening when there's no one speaking, and nodding when the wind moves a bell that shouldn't. The fog is thicker than usual this morning, clinging to your coat like something with an opinion. You tread carefully toward the courthouse, passing chimney stacks that exhale like tired old men and fences that creak when no one's touching them. The street lamps are still lit. Though it's nearly midday, either no one's bothered to douse them or someone thinks the ghost needs the light. Inside, the courtroom is quiet, but not empty. Today's proceedings begin with a rather unusual development. The judge, rather than relying solely on testimony, has decided to conduct what he calls a spectral inspection. In layman's terms, he spent the night on the property. There's a stir through the gallery as this is announced, not because it's shocking, but because it means everyone now gets to watch a very tired magistrate recount his sleepless night in vivid, sleepy detail. You nestle into your bench as the judge clears his throat, sips from a mug that definitely isn't tea, and begins his report. He arrived at dusk, he says, with only a lantern, a notebook, and 2 blankets. He settled himself in the loft of the barn, the alleged epicenter of the haunting, and waited. For what? He wasn't entirely sure. I heard bells, he says, but it might have been the wind. I saw a light, he continues, but it might have been my own lantern, reflected on something. I felt cold, he adds, though I admit I'd forgotten one of the blankets in the cart. Historians still argue whether this inspection was a sincere attempt to gather evidence or simply the judge's way of delaying the verdict by one more day. Some say he emerged from the barn grayer than before. Others suggest he looked exactly the same, just slightly more introspective. But the real moment comes when he says, quite plainly, I did not see the ghost, but I no longer doubt that something lingers there. The courtroom doesn't applaud. Of course not. That would be far too dramatic. But the silence that follows is the kind of silence you only get when a room full of people collectively exhales without meaning to. The defense nods solemnly. The prosecution adjusts his call and mutters something about judicial theatrics. The jury, they're half awake, half bewitched, and all. You shift slightly in your seat, suddenly aware of every sound. The scratch of the clerk's quill, the rustle of a bonnet, the soft tap of something raindrop or footstep against the glass. The judge hands over his notes. They're read aloud by the clerk, who recites them in the voice of a man trying not to fall asleep in public. There are, to your surprise, detailed observations, temperature drops, a sound like rustling paper, and at one point, the sensation that someone was standing behind him. No visible presence, the notes say, but the unmistakable feeling of being watched not malevolently, but mournfully. That line hangs in the air. Then comes the drawing. Yes, the judge drew something in the barn rough sketches in charcoal. A corner of the loft, the shadows under a beam, and in the center, a faint outline labeled simply might be Jonathan. You can't help but chuckle softly. Only in this court would might be Jonathan qualify as evidence. A fringe tidbit emerges. The judge admits he spoke aloud during the night, addressing the air, offering the ghost a chance to state its grievance. I received no reply, he says, but I did sleep more deeply afterward. The defense clings to this as spiritual acknowledgement. The prosecution rolls his eyes so hard it's audible. Still, the court listens. And you listen too. Because in this sleepy courtroom, every sigh becomes a paragraph. Every pause a semicolon in a sentence no one dares to end. Toward the end of the session, the judge leans forward and says something no one expects. If Jonathan Bellwether remains, it is not out of vengeance. I believe it is out of habit. The galley hums with agreement. Yes, habit. What a deeply human reason to haunt a place. You step outside after adjournment, the fog parting for a moment to let the sunlight push through like a bashful guest. You think of the barn, of the quiet judge, of the ghost who may or may not have slept through the entire trial. And as you pull your collar up against the mist, you realize that, somehow, this sleepy court has made room for the invisible, not to fear it, not to prove it, but simply to acknowledge it. And that, perhaps, is the softest kind of justice there is. You return the next day beneath skies so still they feel staged grey cotton stretched over a stage set. The fog hasn't lifted. It's just learned to sit quietly. You imagine the ghost approves. The gallery is fuller than usual. Word has spread not about the verdict, which still drifts somewhere in legal limbo, but about today's witness, Mr. Alderbury, retired gravel digger and the village's unofficial expert in ghostly logistics. You settle into your now permanent groove on the bench, just in time to see him hobble forward. He wears a coat stitched from 3 others and boots that look like they've buried half the county. His hat is politely removed, revealing hair like frost on old wood. Name, asks the clerk. Alderbury, just Alderbury. He replies, as if that alone should be entered into the record with reverence. Occupation was gravel digger. Now, I listen. There's a polite silence. A few in the gallery shift, unsure if that was philosophical or literal. You suspect it's both. Alderbury testifies that he never knew Jonathan Bellwether personally, but he dug the graves of several of his kin. Soft soil. Those plots, he notes, quiet ground. Until it wasn't. The judge raises one brow. This is as expressive as it gets. Alderbury continues. He describes odd murmurs while working tools misplaced, earth that shifted against expectation, and one occasion where he dug a fool for inches down and found a single, polished shoe. Tanu, he says, to dry. No one had been buried in that row in 15 years. Historians still argue whether Alderbury's tales were rooted in actual events or in the peculiar metaphysics of a man who spent 40 years with one foot in the afterlife. Some say he just liked the attention. Others believe him completely. The prosecution challenges his credibility gently, asking if perhaps he ever imagined the disturbances. I imagine peace, Alderbury replies, but I never got it. There's that silence again. The defense leaps on the moment, asking if Alderbury believes Bellwether's ghost is truly present. I believe, he says, that some men leave behind unfinished work. Others leave behind unfinished silence. The quote is recorded, underlined twice, and whispered about in the hallway for the rest of the week. Then, in a twist that could only happen here, Alderbury produces an object, a pocket watch. He says it was recovered near Bellwether's grave 3 years ago, ticking gently, despite no mechanism and no winding key. It's passed round the courtroom with gloved hands, like a communion wafer of soft madness. You don't need to believe it's real. You just need to believe that everyone else believes it's real. And in that courtroom, they do. A fringe detail, the watch, when placed on the judge's bench, emits a very faint ticking sound only when no one is speaking. The clerk swears he hears it. The judge neither confirms nor denies. He simply covers the watch with a napkin and continues. Next comes cross-examination. The prosecution asks Alderbury if he thinks the ghost can be held accountable under current law. I think, Alderbury says, leaning heavily on the rail, that law and ghosts have one thing in common. Neither likes to be interrupted. The judge allows it. As the day wears on, you notice something odd. The court has stopped referring to Bellwether as the alleged spirit. They just call him Bellwether now, as if he's become part of the room. The defense presents a list of other possible hauntings on the property. Flickering lanterns, rearranged furniture, and in one memorable case, a chicken coop inexplicably arranged into the shape of a question mark. The jury, now entirely tuned to this frequency of slow surrealism, accepts the data with gentle nods. One writes down, question mark equals uncertainty. Clever ghost. Outside, the wind picks up. A shutter bangs. No one jumps. They simply pause to see if it was asterisk meaningful. Asterisk. You watch as Alderbury is dismissed and hobbles off the stand with the air of a man who's just handed over his final sermon. The courtroom hums softly. not with drama, but with a kind of shared lull, like the final page of a long letter read aloud to a very quiet room. And as the judge calls for adjournment, you find yourself staring at the pocket watch, still ticking faintly beneath the napkin. You wonder, just for a moment, if maybe it's measuring more than time. Maybe it's measuring presence, or attention, or the slow, sweet drift of a courtroom choosing to listen to what can't be sworn in. You step out into the mist again, feeling it cling to your skin like memory. And you think, this isn't a ghost story. It's a courtesy call from the past. And we, all of us seated inside, have politely answered. This morning, you swear the fog greets you by name. It curls against your boots with the tenderness of an old friend or an old grudge. The courthouse looms out of it, not ominous, just inevitable. At this point, you and the building are on first-name terms. Inside, the benches are unusually polished. Someone no one will admit who has studied the courtroom. The fire's been stoked. The clerk has new ink. Even the bailiff has combed his mustache. It's verdict day. Or rather, it was supposed to be, instead. A new wrinkle has unfurled on the creased brow of justice, a goat. You hear it before you see it, an indignant bleat echoing through the halls like a trumpet blown badly. And then it appears, a white goat with intelligent eyes and a ribbon tied to one horn. The courtroom blinks in perfect sync. It is, as you learn, a spirit-sensitive goat, trained or perhaps simply believed to react to unseen forces. The medium, Madame Featherby, claims the goat named Crispin has assisted in multiple hauntings across the countryside. The judge rubs his temples. The prosecutor is openly contemplating retirement. The defense, positively gleaming. You shift forward in your seat. The jury does the same. The goat, meanwhile, begins calmly nibbling the hem of the bailiff's robe. The demonstration begins. Crispin is led to the witness box, where a candle has been lit and Bellwether's alleged confession placed beneath it. Madame Featherby announces the ghost is present in the room, which at this point is no more surprising than someone announcing the kettle is on. The goat stops chewing. It lifts its head. It bleats twice and stamps its foot once. The gallery, half asleep until now, leans forward. The clerk's quill hovers midair. The judge mutters something that sounds like divine help. Historians still argue whether the goat's behavior was coincidence, conditioning, or simply what goats do when they're bored in rooms full of staring humans. Some folklorists even cite Crispin's testimony as the first non-human response to metaphysical stimuli admitted in an English court. The prosecutor objects, of course. With respect, Your Honor, he says, we are now asking a goat to verify the presence of a ghost. The judge replies, and what would you suggest? A parrot with a law degree. It's not a dismissal, just a tired rhetorical shrug. The goat continues to stand very still, eyes fixed on the empty witness chair. You let the absurdity of it all settle over you like a quilt soft lid, faintly ridiculous. No one is really fighting anymore. The prosecution has stopped trying to win. The defense has stopped trying to convince. Everyone is just here, watching, waiting, listening for hooves and whispers. A fringe moment occurs when one juror offers Crispin a biscuit. The goat accepts with dainty efficiency. Sensitive, the juror mutters. And blight. The testimony ends with the goat lowering its head, curling its legs beneath it, and falling asleep right there in the box. The judge calls for a recess not because anyone's objecting, but because no one knows what to do with a sleeping goat in a legal setting. Outside, you join the others on the courthouse steps. No one speaks loudly. The mist feels gentler today, less like weather, more like punctuation. You overhear a young clerk ask, if the goat believes, is that enough? No one answers. Back inside, when the court resumes, no mention is made of the goat's nap. The record simply reads, Asterisk witness nonverbal ceased movement. No resistance. Asterisk. The rest of the session is filled with gentle debate over whether spiritual acknowledgement can be equated with legal intent. The answer, if there is one, never arrives, but neither does anyone demand it. And as the candles flicker and Crispin snores faintly at the base of the bench, you realize that this courtroom has become something rare, not a place of proof, but of pause. A place where the slow turning of logic makes room for silence. For stories, for ghosts, you file out in the dimming light, feet slow, heart only full. Because justice may not always arrive in thunder or truth. Sometimes, it comes wearing a ribbon and standing quietly in a courtroom full of people just tired enough to listen. The next morning arrives like a soft-spoken solicitor, timely, overcast, and carrying a folder full of ambiguity. You follow your usual path to the courthouse, your boots automatically avoiding the same puddles as the day before. The courthouse cat is waiting for you this time, curled on the sill like a jury member who already knows the verdict. Inside, things are oddly calm. Today, the judge has announced, will be a discussion of definitions. That means no new testimony, no dramatic interruptions, and mercifully no additional livestock. Instead, the court will attempt something more dangerous, philosophical clarity. The topic, what is a person? Yes, they've arrived at that. You settle into your seat with a yawn that echoes faintly across the pews, matched by 3 others and a long, weary sigh from the bailiff. The judge opens with the slow rhythm of a man not in a hurry to solve a problem, but rather to contemplate its edges. He poses the question aloud. If the law recognizes individuals with no land, no name, or no living memory, can it recognize someone with no body? The defense is delighted, of course. They have prepared citations, scrolls, and even a philosophical diagram comparing the soul to a lingering candle flame. It's neither helpful nor legible, but it is, apparently, beautifully illuminated. The prosecution counters with the dry calm of a man holding back a sneeze. He argues that personhood must include legal agency, and ghosts, while compelling, lack both physical form and the ability to hold property, pay fines, or respond to summons. The clerk, whose handwriting has grown more ornamental by the day, carefully writes, asterisk ghost equals non-agent. Asterisk you can't help but notice that even as these arguments drone on, no one leaves. The gallery remains, hats in laps, hands resting softly on the polished railings. They're not here for the outcome. They're here for the rhythm. Historians still argue whether this debate was truly about law or whether the court had simply drifted, like a leaf in a slow stream, into metaphysical meandering. Some scholars insist it marked the beginning of England's curious obsession with legal personhood. Others say it was simply what happens when a sleepy town gets too attached to one particular ghost. A fringe detail. Halfway through the session, someone produces a copy of a very old funeral register, showing that Jonathan Bellwether's burial had been marked with an unusual annotation, his presence. Lingers, it's not clear who wrote it. The ink is faded, the page smells of thyme and mildew, and the registrar who signed it apparently died shortly afterward of excessive startle. This, naturally, is taken as circumstantial evidence. The judge pauses, fingers steepled. He asks the room, gently, whether we define people by what they leave behind. Memories, debts, children, or footprints in the dust of a barn where no one else has walked in years. No one answers, not out of fear, but because the question deserves a kind of hush. The defense, sensing the opportunity, suggests that the ghost's continued presence on the land implies intent to remain what the law might consider residency by occupancy. The prosecution tries to object, but the judge silences him with a soft wave. We are not here, he says, to rule on spectral housing law, only to ask whether presence, in absence, still matters. That one lands. You feel it in your teeth. You glance round. The court feels heavier now. Not darker, but fuller. Like someone just entered the room without opening a door. The candles flicker. The quill scratches. And someone, maybe the judge. Maybe you breathes out so slowly it sounds like wind through pine needles. No conclusions are reached that day. The judge simply closes his book and says, "We will let the question linger." The gallery murmurs their approval, and as you step into the dusk, you realize that's the only answer this sleepy courtroom can truly offer. Not a ruling, but a space to linger. Because sometimes, the most generous thing the law can do is not to decide but to pause, to make room, to listen to footsteps that echo without source and voices that speak only when we grow quiet enough to hear. By now, the courthouse no longer surprises you. You expect the creaking hinges, the soft sigh of old wood, even the damp wool smell that seems to have settled permanently into the fabric of the benches. It's all part of the ritual now. This slow, dreamy drift through the strangest trial England has never quite remembered how to end. You step inside and find the courtroom already full. Not bustling, never that, but quietly occupied by the familiar collection of villagers, jurors, and officials whose patience now rival saints. Today, the court takes up another sleepy question that no other courtroom has dared ask. If a ghost breaks the law, can it be punished? It begins with the prosecution, who rises like a reluctant actor in a well-rehearsed play. He posits the obvious, that in order to break the law, one must be subject to it. And to be subject to the law, one must first exist in a way that law can touch. The judge nods, slowly, very slowly. The defense counters with what might be the sleepiest curveball in legal history. That bellwether may not be crudely capable of paying fines, serving time, or attending rehabilitation classes. But he may still be accountable in a metaphysical sense. He suggests, for example, that if Bellwether is found guilty of disturbing the peace, the court could order a formal exorcism, or, more gently, a ceremonial absolution. The idea, he explains, is not to punish but to help him move on. The gallery perks up a bit. This has the texture of plot development. The judge asks, would such an exorcism be symbolic? The defense smiles faintly. Only if the ghost agrees. A soft chuckle ripples through the pews. Even the clerk smirks as he writes it down. Historians still argue whether this portion of the trial was theological improvisation or a genuine attempt to outline ghost rights jurisprudence. One scholar called it the gentlest thought experiment ever committed to parchment. To explore the idea further, the court calls on Reverend Thistlethwaite again. He steps forward with the weariness of a man who has, quite literally, been asked to bless a haunted fence post. The Reverend suggests that while traditional exorcisms require dramatic flare bells, Latin, at least one screaming participant, it is also possible to perform a silent pardon. A kind of whispered legal hug for the unsettled soul. You nearly laugh. Not because it's ridiculous though it is, but because it's oddly touching. This sleepy court has gone from debating the existence of ghosts to gently proposing comfort rituals for them. A fringe moment. One juror asks if the ghost would need to be present for sentencing. The defense replies, he's never missed a session. The goat pleats softly from the back row. Someone pats its head. The prosecutor, valiantly clinging to structure, reminds the court that fines, punishments, and jail time are impossible for the deceased. What then? He asks, do we do with a ghost who refuses to stop hunting? The judge leans back. Perhaps we listen. And there it is again, that phrase. That instinct. Not to rule, not to reprimand, but to pause, to listen. The defense proposes a compromise. If Bellwether is found to have disturbed the peace, let the court declare him heard and released Not punished, just acknowledged. You can almost hear the courtroom exhale. A suggestion is floated. A memorial plaque on the property. naming Bellwether, recognizing his lingering, granting him permission to rest. The gallery murmurs, "Sonod." One juror dabs at her eye with a lace handkerchief she'd previously used to swat a fly. You don't blame her. And suddenly, without meaning to, the court has stopped talking about ghosts as threats and started talking about them as neighbors. Outside, the mist curls like a closing parenthesis. Inside, the court is quiet now, not from boredom, but from reverence. Because maybe the law isn't always about crime and punishment. Maybe, sometimes, it's about presence and peace. You rise with the rest as the day ends, filing out in a hutch softer than snowfall. The air smells of old paper and brass inkpots, and maybe, just maybe, of lavender from a field no one remembers planting. And as you step into the twilight, you wonder not whether the ghost is guilty, but whether he's finally been forgiven. You return once more, drawn back not by duty, not by curiosity, but by rhythm. There's something soothing in the courthouse routine now. The gentle clatter of boots on worn stone. The way the candles flicker not because they're haunted, but because the windows never quite close properly. The courtroom has begun to feel more like a chapel, a quiet place, a space where time curls in on itself like parchment by a hearth. Today's agenda is peculiar, even by recent standards, a series of community testimonies about the ghost's character. Yes, today, the court will hear who Bellwether was, as a man, as a memory, as a lingering presence in the architecture of the land. First up is a baker's apprentice who never met Bellwether but swears that his great-grandmother described him as polite, punctual, and fond of elderflower cordial. She also claimed he once saved a chicken from drowning, which the defense submits as character evidence. The prosecution opens his mouth to object, but then closes it again. It's not worth the breath. Next is the town librarian, who brings a weathered ledger from 1629 showing Bellwether donated a collection of songs to the community, though reluctantly, and only after being fined for overdue volumes. The gallery chuckles gently. You smile. It's nice to know even ghosts were once annoyed by late fees. The most touching testimony comes from an elderly woman in a plum-colored shawl. She remembers hearing stories of Bellwether's garden. He had a way with herbs, she says. The mint grew sweeter near his door. Historians still debate whether any of these stories were true, or simply the sleepy folklore of a town that needed its ghosts to be kind. But the judge allows each memory, no matter how faint, into the record. The clerk, clearly enchanted now, writes them down with flourishes, each line a soft act of preservation. A fringe moment. Someone from the gallery produces a sketch of what they imagine Bellwether might have looked like. It's passed from hand to hand until it reaches the judge, who examines it carefully before pinning it to the wall behind the bench. A generous likeness, he murmurs, and there it remains, a figure in a high collar, holding a book, one hand resting on a shovel or perhaps a cane. His eyes are kind and a little tired. The court pauses for tea. When they return, the defense proposes that if the ghost has been understood, if the community now sees him not as nuisance, but as neighbor, then perhaps the time has come not for a verdict, but for a farewell. The judge rubs his chin and considers. The jury seems ready. The goat, now permanently stationed by the witness box, is fast asleep, its ears twitching at invisible sounds. Then the bailiff steps forward. He asks to speak. He's been silent all trial, moving chairs, escorting witnesses, guarding the door against exactly no threats. But now he clears his throat and says, "I've worked in this court 30 years, seen all manner of mischief, but I never saw a room get quieter than when that ghost showed up." No one interrupts. Maybe he just wanted to be heard, the bailiff adds. Or maybe we all did. He sits, that's all. The judge nods slowly, then stands not fully, just enough to signify that something has shifted. And in a voice no louder than falling snow, he says, "Let us prepare our judgment not to punish, but to acknowledge." You exhale. The gallery doesn't cheer. Of course not. But they breathe together, because this sleepy courtroom, with its goats and mediums and well-dressed phantoms, has done something no one expected. It told a story about a man who refused to leave until someone remembered how to say goodbye, and as the session ends, you glance once more at the sketch on the wall. He looks peaceful there, maybe even ready. By now, the courtroom no longer feels like a place where laws are weighed and verdicts are delivered. It feels like a memory, a recurring dream, the sort that plays slowly in candlelight, with heavy curtains and the smell of ink-stained parchment that clings to the corners of your thoughts. Today's session is simple in premise, but strange in delivery. The jury will hear the final testimonies and prepare their judgment. But instead of lawyers rising with dramatic closing arguments, it's the townsfolk again, one by one, coming forward with stories. Not evidence, not pleas, just stories, as though Bellwether has become less of a case and more of a folklore character they've decided to carry gently home. First is the cooper, who says that on a still winter morning last year, he heard someone humming an old drinking tune in his workshop. He hadn't played it in decades, but it was one Bellwether reportedly loved. "I didn't see him," the cooper says. "Didn't need to." Then a schoolboy, no more than 10, tells the court that a figure in the fog once helped him find his way back after he got lost by the stream. The figure didn't speak, but raised one hand and pointed home. The courtroom listens. No questions, no cross-examinations. Just listening. You rest your chin in your hand, lulled by the steady rhythm of these stories. It's like hearing verses of the same lullaby sung by different voices, each adding a note that softens the air. Historians still argue whether this was a legal proceeding or a communal elegy. Some say it was performance. Others say it was truth wearing the cloak of nonsense. Most agree it doesn't really matter. The judge asks the jury if they are prepared. They nod slowly, unanimously, as if in a trance. And then, in one of the sleepiest and most peculiar rulings in the history of English law, the court delivers its judgment that Jonathan Bellwether, former landowner, is not guilty of disturbance, but guilty of asterisk lingering, asterisk that his presence, though incorporeal, has been felt, heard, and acknowledged, and that in acknowledgement, he may now, with permission, asterisk depart, asterisk. The gallery is still. The air itself seems to pause. A fringed detail emerges. The goat, Crispin, lifts his head and bleats once. No one laughs. It sounds final, like punctuation. Then the judge stands fully, for the first time in days. He reads from a parchment prepared that morning. "Let it be known that this court has seen what cannot be seen, heard what should not speak, and judged without the expectation of justice. We declare the record closed not with gavel or punishment, but with peace." The courtroom remains silent, not out of reverence, not out of fear, but because there is nothing left to say. You walk outside and find the fog has lifted, not gone, but thinned to a veil. The rooftops are visible now. The trees seem taller. Even the sky seems to blink, as if waking from a long, gentle nap. The villagers gather. Some exchange quiet words. Some leave without saying anything at all. And you linger, because it's hard to leave a place that's held so much stillness. Harder still to leave when you've been heard alongside the dead, the quiet, and the long-forgotten. Back inside, the courtroom empties. The goat is led away. The candles are extinguished one by one. Only the judge remains, seated quietly, staring at the space where the witness chair stands empty. For the first time all week, no one claims it is occupied. The final day arrives not with drama, but with stillness. The mist has lifted, the benches have been wiped down, and though no one says it aloud, There's a shared understanding in the air, like the last note of a lullaby humming through the rafters long after the voice has gone quiet. You step into the courtroom with a sense of calm that surprises you. No one rushes. No one fidgets. The gallery fills slowly, respectfully, as though entering a service rather than a trial. The judge is already seated. The clerk has no documents today, only a single clean sheet of parchment waiting for a signature. There is no docket, no new witnesses, no objections, only closure, and in a twist both expected and strange. The final act belongs to no lawyer, no official, no goat. It belongs to a letter. The clerk stands and reads it aloud. A letter, he says, delivered without courier, postmark, or witness. Discovered this morning on the judge's bench, written in unfamiliar hand. No ink smudge, no signature, just presence. The parchment reads, "To those who stayed long enough to listen, I forgive your questions, and I thank your silence. I lived in the margins, but you drew me a page. I walked unseen, but you made space in the record. Let the field rest now. Let the soil breathe. I am heard. I am leaving. Yours, the tenant between moments." The silence after is not heavy. It's soft, like the pause after a deep breath taken. Not in grief, but in relief. Historians still argue whether this letter was a final dramatic flourish by the defense, a trick played by the court's poetically minded janitor, or something else, but no one questions its placement. No one demands proof. The judge folds it gently, places it in the record book, and announces, "The matter of bellwether is closed." No gavel, just a quiet tap of his fingers on the wood. And with that, the trial that began with laughter and skepticism, goats and invisible witnesses, ends not with a verdict, but with a farewell. The gallery rises. Crispin, the goat, now officially retired, is presented with a wreath of herbs and promptly attempts to eat it. The parson leads a brief blessing. The defense lays a single feathered quill at the witness chair, and you linger, because something in this sleepy, absurd, beautiful ceremony feels more real than any shouting match in any bright courtroom you've ever known. Outside, the sky is startlingly clear. The trees sway gently, like bowing. You walk toward the edge of Hatchley's land, where a new stone has been set into the grass. It reads, "Here stood Jonathan Bellwether. He lingered, we listened, he rests." You close your eyes for a moment, and for once, no wind stirs, no bell rings, no cold hand brushes your shoulder, only peace. And in that silence, you know, the ghost is gone. The courtroom is empty, and something, finally, has been set right. The case is over. The courtroom is quiet now, emptied of footsteps, freed from arguments, its walls holding only the soft memory of voices that never rose above a murmur. Outside, the village carries on softly, gently. A boy skips a stone across the stream. A baker wipes flour from her hands. No one talks about the ghost anymore, but they all walk a little slower past the stone. And sometimes they nod. You stretch your legs. The last pages of the record are written. The ink is dry, and still, part of you doesn't want to leave just yet. That's okay. Not every ending needs to be hurried. Let the air settle. Let the story breathe. You followed it through flickering candles and spectral cold spots, through goats and grave diggers and one very tired judge. And now, here at the end, you can let it all rest. Because justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like presence. Sometimes it sounds like quiet. Sometimes it feels like a courtroom full of sleepy people who choose, for once, not to dismiss something simply because it was unseen. So curl into the silence. Let it rock you gently. Let the story drift from your mind like mist across a forgotten field. You're safe here. You're warm here. And Bellwether, wherever he has gone, is too. Sweet dreams.